Good morning again, students of Ms. Coe's class 506, Rodriguez Elementary. I am going to read chapter 1 of Dragonwings by Lawrence Yep. This chapter is called The Land of the Demons, and it also has a date there, February through March 1903. So that gives you a big clue about the setting. Again, I would like you to focus on these questions. What are the principal characters of the book so far? What is the setting? And what is the theme so far? Also, why is the first chapter called The Land of the Demons? What is the Land of the Demons, according to the narrator? And you might want to think about who is telling the story. Who is the narrator? And finally, what is this place called Middle Earth? Okay, so I'm going to start reading, and I hope you enjoy the first chapter. It's about 18 pages long, so bear with me. Ever since I can remember, I had wanted to know about the land of the Golden Mountain, but my mother had never wanted to talk about it. All I knew was that a few months before I was born, my father had left our home in the Middle Kingdom, or China, as the white demons call it, and traveled over the sea to work in the demon land. There was plenty of money to be made among the demons, but it was also dangerous. My own grandfather had been lynched about 30 years before by a mob of white demons, almost the moment he had set foot on their shores. Mother usually said she was too busy to answer my questions. It was a fact that she was overworked, for grandmother was too old to help her with the heavy work, and she had to try to do both her own work and father's on our small farm. The rice had to be grown from seeds and the seedlings transplanted to the paddies, and the paddies tended and harvested. Besides this, she always had to keep one eye on our very active pig to keep him from rooting in our small vegetable patch. She also had to watch our 3 chickens, who loved to wander away from our farm. Any time I brought up the subject of the Golden Mountain, Mother suddenly found something going wrong on our farm. Maybe some seedlings had not been planted into their underwater beds properly, or perhaps our pig was eating the wrong kind of garbage, or maybe one of our chickens was dirtying our doorway. She always had some good excuse for not talking about the Golden Mountain. I knew she was afraid of the place, because every chance we got, she would take me into the small temple in our village and we would pray for Father's safety, though she would never tell me what she was afraid of. It was a small satisfaction to her that our prayers had worked so far. Mother was never stingy about burning incense for Father. I was curious about the land of the Golden Mountain, mainly because my father was there. I had, of course, never seen my father, and we could not go to live with him for 2 reasons. For one thing, the white demons could not let wives join their husbands on the Golden Mountain because they did not want us to settle there permanently. And for another thing, our own clans discouraged wives from leaving because it would mean an end to the money the husbands sent home to their families, one which was spent in the Middle Kingdom. The result was that the wives stayed in the villages, seeing their husbands every 5 years or so if they were lucky, though sometimes there were longer separations, as with mother and father. We had heavy debts to pay off, including the cost of Father's ticket. And Mother and Grandmother had decided to invest the money Father sent us in buying more land and livestock. At any rate, there was no money to spare for Father's visit back home. But my mother never complained about the hard work or the loneliness. As she said, we were the people of the Tang, by which she meant we were a tough, hardy, patient race. We did not call ourselves Chinese, but the people of the Tang, after that famous dynasty that had helped settle our area some 1100 years ago. It would be the same as if an English demon called himself a man of the Tudors in the dynasty of Henry VIII and of Elizabeth I, though demon names sound so drab compared to ours. But sometimes Mother's patience wore thin. It usually happened when we walked over to the small side room in the temple, where classes were also held. Like many other people, Mother and Grandmother could neither read nor write, but for a small fee, the village schoolmaster would read one of Father's weekly letters to us, or write a letter at our dictation. In the evening after dinner, we would join the line of people who had a husband or brothers or sons overseas. There we would wait until it was our turn to go inside the temple, and Mother would nervously turn the letter over and over again in her hands until Grandmother would tell her she was going to wear out the letters before we could read it. To tell the truth, I knew as little about my father as I knew about the land of the Golden Mountain, but Mother made sure that I knew at least one important thing about him. He was a maker of the most marvelous kites. Everyone in the village said he was a master of his craft, and his kites were often treasured by their owners like family heirlooms. As soon as I was big enough to hold the string, Mother took me out to the hill near our village where we could fly one of Father's kites. Just the two of us would go. But you won't appreciate my father's skill if you think flying a kite, any kind of kite, is just putting a bunch of paper and sticks up into the air. I remember the first time we went to fly a kite. There was nothing like the thrill when my kite first leaped up out of Mother's hands into the air. Then she showed me how to pull and tug and guide the kite into the winds, and when the winds caught the kite, it shot upward. She told me then how the string in my hand was like a leash and the kite was like a hound that I had sent hunting to flush a sunbeam or a stray phoenix out of the clouds. But then she warned me that I had to stay alert, because sometimes the winds would try to tear the kite from my hand and I would have to hold on. Or maybe the winds would try to drop my kite so it would smash to the ground. In that case, I would have to hurry up and reel in the slack and pull and steer the kite back into the winds until, just to get rid of the nuisance, the wind would take my kite where I wanted it to go. I failed miserably the first times I tried to fly the kite, but Mother would not let me give up, and eventually I got quick enough and strong enough and smart enough so that my kite would be flying far overhead, so far away that I would lose sight of the string that I had attached to the kite, and the kite would seem to be some colored patch of rainbow that was following me about. And then Mother would say that she was sure the kite was flying so high that the Jade Emperor, the Lord of Heaven and Earth, could admire my kite from his palace window. That was what flying a kite was all about. And of course, Father's kites were most truly balanced and the strongest, and yet the most beautiful. In fact, his kites practically flew themselves. At first, Mother only let me use Father's ordinary kites. He had made some special kites just before he left, when he knew my mother was pregnant. My mother said I could not fly those kites until I was older and wiser, that is, when I turned 8. The Tang people count the first 9 months the mother carries the baby as the baby's first year. By demon reckoning, I was only 7. I can't say who was prouder, my mother or I, when I finally managed to fly Father's special kites. One was a sharply climbing swallow kite that was hard to get up, but there was nothing as fast as the swallow once it was up. The swallow swooped down with the slightest flick of the wrist, or soared skyward with the tiniest jerk of the string. There was a large, long caterpillar kite, too, that took even longer to set up than the swallow. But once it was in the sky, it would stay forever, crawling back and forth over the clouds. But the best thing about flying any of the kites was what it did for Mother. She would throw off all her cares and become young again, running with me or taking a turn at flying the kite. She would chatter on about the things that she and Father used to do when they were young, for they had grown up here. They had both grown up here. She taught me everything that Father had ever shown her about flying kites. She said that one of the first things he would want to see when he returned home for a visit was how well I could fly them. But even at these moments, Mother would never speak of the Golden Mountain. But I felt that since I was now 8 and had mastered the hardest of Father's kites to fly, I was also old enough to get some answers. Mother still would not talk about the Golden Mountain, and in fact got mad at me. Grandmother felt sorry for me then, and she tried to tell me, among other things, why we called America the land of the Golden Mountain. "It's because there's a big mountain there," she said. "The mountain's 1,000 miles high and 3,000 miles wide, and all a man has to do is wait until the sun warms the mountain and then scoop the gold into big buckets." I squirmed on the bench. "Then why doesn't Father go get the gold instead of washing clothes?" Grandmother shook her head. "It's because of the demons, you see. They roam the mountain up and down, and they beat up any of our men who try to get the gold. The demons use clubs as big as trees, and they kick them and do worse things. But if you do the work they tell you to do, and then they let you take a little pinch of the gold." "Is that what happened to Grandfather? Did the demons catch him when he was trying to sneak some of the gold into his pockets?" Grandmother sighed. She had been married to Grandfather only a year before he had left to make his fortune. "Perhaps, but," she added meaningfully, "the demons would just as soon beat up the Tang people for no good reason." I nodded in understanding when Grandmother spoke of senseless beatings, for I had seen some of the other guests who had returned. There was Crook Arm, whose left arm dangled down uselessly by his side with 2 of his fingers missing. And there were other men whose backs were stooped, their fingers gnarled, and their faces worn and tired as old masks. I did not know at the time that this was simply all from a life of hard work. I thought that torture had done this to them. Many of them had the lung disease. Tuberculosis was the demon word, and they hacked and spat constantly. Bit by bit they coughed up their broken lungs. Everyone in the village knew they had not long to live. Still, more returned in their coffins, a silent testimony to the harshness of their demon hosts. I did not realize that I would find out at first hand about the Golden Mountain.